The Honorable, the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, as you may be aware, Mr. Nazim Muradali, former Member of Parliament for Naparima North, passed away on Friday, November 30th, 2018. I now invite honorable members to pay their respective tributes to Mr. Nazim Muradali. Member for San Fernando East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of my party, the People's National Movement, I would like to extend condolences to the family of the late Nazim Muradali. Mr. Muradali served as the member for Naparima North in the second independent parliament during the years 1966 to 1971. He won the seat for Naparima North as a candidate for the Democratic Labour Party by a very close margin, securing the seat ahead of 3 other candidates. He was elected as a Member of Parliament for just 4 years after gaining our independence, which was a great time and era for Trinidad and Tobago. He served with some of the political giants, such as Dr. Eric Williams, Mr. Arnold Tomasos, Mr. George Chambers, Mr. Bhoendradatt Tewarie, Ms. Verna Kitchener, and Ms. Leslie Balgobin. As a new member of this honorable house, I can only imagine what it would be like to serve in that era, steering the course for where we are today as a country. Mr. Muradali was also a justice of the peace and a popular radio announcer. It was as a radio announcer he met his wife, Vidya Puran Muradali, a former principal of Asja Girls College, San Fernando, when he interviewed her for one of his programs after she returned from a trip to India. The couple had 2 children, Kavita, who became an attorney at law, and Navi, a medical doctor and a former councillor for the electoral district of Lesafort East, Sepero, and subsequently former mayor of the city of San Fernando. I take this opportunity on behalf of the government bench to express my deepest condolences to Navi and the rest of the family during this time of mourning, and I wish them the comfort and strength needed in this time of bereavement. Thank you.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today we celebrate the life and contribution of a true patriot, Nazim Muradali, who in 1966 entered this house as the MP for Naparima North. Mr. Muradali died in Barbados on the Friday, the 30th November 2018. He served his country well and was among a host of cultural icons like Lionel F. Sukaran, Babu Ram Singh, Kamaluddin Mohammed, Hans Hanuman Singh, and Pat Mathura, who were able to leverage their service in the development of the arts to engage in politics. They were indeed patrons of Indian art in Trinidad and Tobago. In essence, Mr. Muradali and his fellow icons gave a voice to the largely East Indian, rural, and disenfranchised community in the national arena. At the same time, they were able to engage in cultural retention and adaptation by giving a not insignificant groups of citizens a sense of cultural identity, self-esteem, and social stability in a largely hostile colonial environment that saw all things non-European, such as what they called, quote, the heathen practice of shouting by shouter Baptists, end of quote, as unworthy of contemplation and social acceptance. Their contribution to our national ethos cannot be ignored. I met Mr. Miradali on many occasions at a well-known social spot on Leoto Street in San Fernando. He was a wealth, he was a walking encyclopedia of knowledge on social, cultural, economic, and political developments in our country. He was a global citizen and understood well the need for tolerance, acceptance, and for celebration of the various religions in our country. He believed that Trinidad and Tobago was a favored place by having all the great religions of planet Earth in this small geographic space. He was equally comfortable at Susumacha Presbyterian Church, in any San Fernando mosque, or in any temple. A practicing Muslim, he married Miss Vidya Puran Miradali, who came from a well-known Hindu family. His wife was a very successful principal of Ashja Girls College, San Fernando, for many decades. When issues rose with the principalship, which threatened the very existence of the Concordat, Nazim worked tirelessly behind the scenes to diffuse the situation, which resulted in his wife being transferred by consensus to the Tabakit Composite School. I'm personally grateful to him for helping me to adapt to opposition politics, representing Napa River, the great constituency. He lived at a time when opposition had little hope of forming the government. He had to deal with repeated negative comments, and he stood his ground firmly. He could at times be cast even as representing a recalcitrant minority, but he took it in stride, mindful always that this was part of building a successful, first world, and peaceful Trinidad and Tobago, a task to which he was totally committed. He loved Trinidad and Tobago. He served in many political arenas, offering himself as an independent candidate for Pointe-a-Pierre in 1976. He subsequently withdrew his candidacy during the allotted time. He was a long-serving Justice of Peace. His children are all well accomplished. His son, Dr. Navi Miradali, became the 8th mayor of San Fernando after city status was granted to that important southern urban community. He became the 8th mayor after successfully contesting the electoral district of Laissez-Faire East, Cipero, on a narrow ticket, NAR ticket. That seat was formerly held by Senator Kazim Hussein, who did not contest. We thank God for persons like Nazim Miradali. We celebrate his contribution to our nation. May Allah grant him eternal peace in the hereafter.
Honorable members, I too wish to pay tribute to Mr. Nazim Miradali. As an outstanding citizen, teacher, and justice of the peace, Mr. Nazim Miradali not only served as an elected member of Parliament, but the wider Trinidad and Tobago in his various endeavors. Honorable members, today we remember Mr. Nazim Miradali not only as a parliamentarian, but as a school principal, radio host, father, husband, colleague, friend, mentor, and servant of our twin island republic. During his tenure, he served on the Public Accounts Committee from 1969 to 1970 and 1970 to 1971, in addition to a special select committee in 1970. His parliamentary debating record indicated that he was a true champion for the development of his constituency, highlighting the needs of all citizens, and he was known for his gracious parliamentary conduct. I take this opportunity to express my deepest condolences to his family during this time of mourning, and I pray that they be granted the comfort and strength needed in this time of bereavement. I now ask that we stand and observe a moment of silence as a mark of respect. May his soul rest in peace. Honorable members, I have directed the clerk of the House to convey our condolences in writing to the family of the late Mr. Nazim Muradali.
Bills brought from the Senate, the Magistrates Protection Amendment Bill 2018, in the name of the Attorney General. Petitions, papers.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay paper number 1, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Works and Transport to the 4th report of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure on an inquiry into the Trinidad and Tobago inter-island ferry service with specific focus on the procurement and maintenance of ferries. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Reports from committees.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the 11th report of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, on an inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Regulated Industries Commission.
Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Oropouche East.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, question number 1 to the Honourable Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister indicate his course of action in relation to the request by the Law Association to consider triggering Section 137 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, decency would have dictated that this question be a little delayed. The vote at the Law Association took place last night, I think, and I'm now being asked what action I intend to take. Madam Speaker, I have no matter in front of me at this time, and therefore I have nothing to report on.
Supplemental question, member for Oropouche East.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive reply. Could the Prime Minister indicate, in light of his knowledge of what is in the public domain already, whether or not he will venture to say what he proposed to do in the circumstances where knowledge is in the public domain?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that might be the way some of my colleagues in this House would conduct public business. But I have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things. This is a serious constitutional matter. And I don't know that I'm being asked to take action on something, on some knowledge in the public domain. Madam Speaker, I do not intend to run the business of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in that manner.
Supplemental, member for Oropouche East.
Thank you very much. With regards to the response of the Prime Minister, could I therefore ask the Prime Minister whether the Prime Minister can make a commitment today that he will attend to this matter with the alacrity and urgency that it deserves?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the commitment I made to the people of Trinidad and Tobago was made right here in this place, in my oath of office, to act without fear or favor, without malice or ill will. I have no other commitment to make to the member for Oropouche West or any other person in this country.
Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 2 to the Honourable Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister indicate whether an agreement has been reached to sell CLICO to a company in the financial sector?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I am not aware that any agreement has been made to sell the assets of CLICO to any institution in or out of the financial sector. What I do know, Madam Speaker, is that the central bank, the authority in control, had open discussions with SAGICO with respect to the asset base, the sale of the relevant assets. However, just as those discussions were opening up, another development with an international implication occurred, where SAGICO was somehow being interested in or being the interest of an external party And at that stage, the discussions have been paused while these developments clarify themselves.
Supplemental, member for Carney Central.
Yes. Prime Minister, would Sagicor be the only company which is engaged on this matter if the pause is lifted in a future discussion?
I could not respond to that at this time, Madam Speaker, because the circumstances would be determined by the central bank in the appropriate fashion.
Supplemental, member for Carney Central.
Are you saying, Prime Minister, that this matter will be attended to solely by the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, there are authorities that are involved in this, of which the central bank is the principal authority under law, but with the involvement, the measured involvement of the Ministry of Finance, which will eventually make the final decisions in the appropriate fashion.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given warnings issued by opposition forces in Venezuela that they will not honor agreements entered into with the Maduro government, could the Prime Minister indicate what steps the government intends to take to ensure that our agreements survive a change of government in that country?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want the population of Trinidad and Tobago to take careful note of the behavior of the opposition in Trinidad and Tobago on this matter. Madam Speaker, we came to this House and indicated that we were engaging in far-reaching discussions with the government of Venezuela. We in Trinidad and Tobago have no role in who is the government of Venezuela. We treat with the government of Venezuela as it exists in Venezuela. And on this particular matter, Madam Speaker, we have eventually done what our opposition colleagues said was not possible, which is to get an agreement with the government of Venezuela to have commercial access to gas fields off our northwest coast. I'm aware, Madam Speaker, that members of this opposition in Trinidad and Tobago have been trying to get members of the opposition in Venezuela to oppose this matter. Correct. Madam Speaker, I make no further comment at this time. But Madam Speaker, after a year and a half of the successful conclusion of this international agreement, lo and behold, one individual from the Venezuelan opposition comes to Trinidad and Tobago to say that the agreement may not be honored. I want to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, pay careful attention. Whatever you think of the government of Venezuela, whatever you think of the government of Venezuela, that government is a matter for the people of Venezuela. That government is engaged in trading and agreements with a number of countries around the world. Russia, China, Colombia, the United States, Brazil. The only place where this kind of talk is present and in vogue is in Trinidad and Tobago, where the opposition in Trinidad and Tobago is trying to get the Venezuelan opposition to torpedo an agreement between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Venezuela for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and there's a name for that.
Time spent. Supplemental, member for Naparima.
I would misstate categorically, we are not engaged with the...
Naparima.
My question...
Do you have a question, member? Please ask the question.
The question is, given reports in the United States media that it would take $1 billion worth of investments in order to facilitate this agreement, does the Prime Minister think it prudent to invest taxpayers' money in something that may not last a regime change?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is the kind of misinformation that is being fed to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, we are at the stage in this agreement where there's a heads of agreement between the governments. Commercial agreements have also been inked in between commercial companies. Madam Speaker, if a commercial contract exists between Trinidad and Tobago business houses, Shell, PDVSA, these are contracts that will be identified and come under the supervision of international law. I don't know what is this obsession with this opposition about regime change. And Madam Speaker, if an investment is to be made to bring gas from Dragon or anywhere else in Venezuela to Point Lisas, that investment will be a business deal that will stand on that basis. And Madam Speaker, I would encourage the opposition in Trinidad and Tobago to look out for the people of Trinidad and Tobago and support the best and not regime change. Madam Speaker, this is a far-reaching development. For years we have been talking about our gas and our gas, running out of gas in Trinidad and Tobago. We have now a heads of agreement between our nearest neighbor, where we now need to build a pipeline from Dragon to Hibiscus platform. What is the problem the opposition have with that?
Maintenance issues, no gas shortfall.
Supplemental member for Puchis.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In light of the forthright response of the Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister now have the courage and the honesty to state which member or members on the opposition bench is speaking to the opposition in Venezuela?
Okay, member for Oropuch East, I will allow you to re-ask your question. There are certain innuendos in 2 words used there. Please ask your question without those 2 words. Thank you.
The question made simpler. Could the Prime Minister now demonstrate the courage and the honesty to name members of the opposition who are involved in undermining the agreement in Venezuela?
Again, I didn't say the 2 words. I expect that everybody in here is honest. And that's the innuendo in the word. So you can, I am going to give you an opportunity to ask again. If you persist, well then I'll do what I have to do.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On the 3rd time, could the Prime Minister...
For the 3rd time, you're not asking it for the 1st time.
Okay, for the 1st time, could the Prime Minister indicate to this Honourable House the identity of members of the opposition who he's aware of are trying to undermine the agreement between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela among opposition members in Venezuela?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, normally we handle this by saying, call name, I go whistle. But Madam Speaker, my colleague from Oropuch East could assist us and the country by telling us who brought that opposition member here to come and talk that talk in Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Point of Pierce, supplemental.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Prime Minister, in the light of his response, could you state when would Trinidad and Tobago get in the first shipment or supply of gas from Venezuela, based on what you said?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I am not in a position to answer that question today. What we have done, we have laid the groundwork for a commercial agreement. We've said on many occasions inside of this House and outside of this House that what we expect to happen now is that further agreements are to be concluded with respect to the construction of a pipeline. The most difficult part of this agreement, Madam Speaker, was the agreement on a gas price. And now that we have a gas price, we have a market, and we have gas in the hole, we expect that the business will flow from there. It is our intention to have that gas flowing as quickly as possible, and it all depends on the agreement and the construction of the pipeline and the businesses that go with that, Madam Speaker. And I should mention once again that we are in partnership with Shell on this matter.
Supplemental member for Puchis. Member for Naparima.
Thank you. Is the Prime Minister willing to indicate to this Honourable House that whatever agreement is arrived at in respect of the construction of the pipeline or other infrastructure, that taxpayers' money will not be involved and it will be solely at the cost of the private sector?
Prime Minister.
Speaker, I will do no such thing. Because, Madam Speaker, if it is that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are required to participate in a pipeline from the Venezuelan gas field to the Hibiscus platform, which we are part owner in, so as to keep Point Lisas going, so as to bring additional business to Trinidad and Tobago, what problem does my colleague have with taxpayers investing in it? Madam Speaker, you understand where their mind is? Madam Speaker, it is the investment that the taxpayers make in these kinds of business that are carrying us today. The people of Trinidad and Tobago invested in Point Lisas. We own the national gas company, and a member of parliament is coming to ask me to make a commitment that we wouldn't invest in a pipeline if needs be.
Exactly.
If the private sector is prepared to partner with us, and I just told you, Madam Speaker, Shell is partnering with us. What is their problem with the government taking some interest in the pipeline if we have to? That is what the business is, and it would involve a lot of money, but high investment brings high returns in the hydrocarbon business. Madam Speaker, I am telling the people of Trinidad and Tobago that this opposition on these matters are people to watch. I will make no such commitment.
Question number 4, member for Naparima.
The Honourable Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister state the plans in place to assist fence-line communities such as Marabella and Santa Flora to cope with the closure of Petrotrin?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, a number of initiatives, some have been taken, some are to be taken, and we will continue to acknowledge that the south and southwest of Trinidad in particular would be more affected negatively than elsewhere in the country. As a result of that, Madam Speaker, our development program in the area of San Fernando all the way down to Point 14 is leading the national development program in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is not accidental. Madam Speaker, the first thing we did is to ensure that the company which did not have the means and the wherewithal to provide the workers with a proper separation package, the government of Trinidad and Tobago obtained and made available to the workers of Petrotrin who were directly affected $2.7 billion in cash, so that those workers leave the company with a substantial cash in hand. The second thing we did, Madam Speaker, is that we increased the tax-free level from $300,000 to $500,000, tax-free, so that the first $500,000 of whatever they would get in the separation package is tax-free, and taxes only would apply to what is beyond $500,000. Madam Speaker, we have indicated that we would ensure that the social support systems of the country focus excessively on these areas to pick up any hardships which will occur after proper scrutiny, Madam Speaker, because as you observe, even as we are putting out money there to help people who are in distress, there are persons in the national community who are prepared to take more than their fair share. We have to be careful, but we will do that to help persons. And Madam Speaker, we would also ensure that the lands that are available to Petrotrin being one of the largest entities over state land in this country, that portions of those lands all over the southwestern peninsula and South Trinidad are identified for development and for transfer in ownership to those workers at Petrotrin who can benefit from such. And I'll be making a statement in this parliament in the very near future on that matter.
Member for Naparima, supplemental.
Thank you very much, but could the Prime Minister answer the question by stating at least 2 plans in place for Marabella, so that when the national community and our citizens in Marabella and Santa Flora will know 2 things at least that are being done for them?
Prime Minister.
Speaker, if my colleague from Naparima can come further than 1 to 2, I just outlined far more than 2 plans there, and I'll assist him to go back to kindergarten.
Naparima. Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to the Honourable Prime Minister. Question number 5. In light of additional reports surfacing about a pattern of behaviour by at least one cabinet minister at the Piarco International Airport, could the Prime Minister indicate what steps have been taken to ensure that government ministers do not defy the authority of customs officials upon entering and exiting the country?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'm sure my colleague from Princestown is getting his knickers in a twist, because it is not in this government, that there are ministers who are defying customs and similar authorities. I know of no minister in this government who has been defying customs at the airport, and I have no report of that matter. in front of me.
Supplemental, member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam. To the Honourable Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister indicate whether he has spoken directly and asked for a report on the incident concerning Minister Dennis Moses and Minister Camille Robinson-Regis at the Piarco International Airport?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have spoken to both ministers, and I am quite satisfied that there is no question of ministers in this government defying customs at Piarco Airport. I know of no such report, and I have no minister in this government that is defying customs at the airport.
Supplemental.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister say if he is concerned that ministers who continuously defy customs and refuse to adhere to customs laws might be using their position to ensure that their persons and belonging is not checked and examined?
I will not allow that as a supplemental question, having regard to the two questions and responses that have gone before. Member for Princestown, question number 6.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 6 to the Honourable Prime Minister. In light of the devastating floods that hit South Trinidad recently, could the Prime Minister indicate how many persons have received their grants up to this time?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the relevant ministry has received 186 assessment forms on November 21st and 23rd. 136 forms were received on the 28th. Both sets are being verified by the Ministry of Social Development, which is liaising with the Ministry of Finance, so that the qualifying applicants in that package will receive the published assistance that would be made available.
Supplemental, member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is the Honourable Prime Minister saying that up to this time, no one has received grants coming out from those floods?
Prime Minister.
I have said no such thing. I spoke about the number of assessments, and Madam Speaker, I am not at this moment available to tell, I'm not in a position to tell him how many, but I do know that the process is well underway, and those are the numbers we're dealing with.
Supplemental, member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam. Could the Honourable Prime Minister say whether he is aware that persons have still not received their grants since Tropical Storm Brett in the areas of Penal, Davie, Barrackpore, Princestown, Naparima, Urupuch East, Urupuch West, Separia?
I will not allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Caroni East.
Prime Minister, would you indicate whether there have been or has been any investigation into the 45 million reported overpayment for the flood relief?
Prime Minister.
The matter is being actively investigated by the competent authorities.
Member for Urupuch West.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the member for Urupuch West, Honourable Prime Minister, question number 7. With regard to the Prime Minister's comments at a public meeting in Marabella, indicating that the Petrotrin workers would be taken care of, could the Prime Minister indicate the plans for the fired Petrotrin workers?
Prime Minister.
In the absence of the member for Urupuch West, I can simply say, Madam Speaker, I just answered that question.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 8 to the Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister state whether an official investigation has been launched into the recent spate of threatening phone calls to his phone?
Prime Minister.
I would be assisted, Madam Speaker, if my colleague from Couva South could tell me which of the threatening phone calls you're talking about.
Member for Couva North.
Prime Minister, I make reference to those threatening calls that you commented upon in the media after your number was circulated by former Minister Devant Miraj.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, any call which warranted the intervention of law enforcement, and by that I refer to calls that were threatening or calls that were in breach of the law, such calls would be directed to the authority, which is the police, Commissioner of Police, and that has been done. And I presume, while I can't confirm, that any such report would be attended to by the relevant police action.
Supplemental, member for Cougar North.
Thank you. Prime Minister, as you indicated also to the public, have you gotten a new number and activated it?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, there was a time when I would have easily given that number to my colleague from Cougar North. But given the behavior of my colleagues with telephone numbers, I will do no such thing.
Member for Cougar North, question number 9.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 9 to the Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister state how close the government is to signing a final contract with Sandals International?
Prime Minister.
Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, there's an obsession with this Sandals project, which I can't understand. Madam Speaker, I am so happy that my colleagues on the other side are so concerned about taxpayers' money now. Now that the horse has bolted, I wish you were so concerned when you were in government. We would have been in a much better place today. Madam Speaker, as told to the national community, the gestation period and the activities involved in bringing this project into fruition is the one that is ongoing, and we are not anywhere near to any position about signing any final contract with Sandals. The process of developing this project is going ahead unhindered through the normal channels. And at the end of those processes, if a contract has to be signed, we would be the first to inform the country, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental question, member for Urupuchis.
Thank you very much. In light of the fact that Sandals was not procured through normal channels, could the Prime Minister indicate whether UDICOT is the project manager and UDICOT is under the office of the Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I would just like to ask my colleague from Urupuch East to stop spreading misinformation. None of what yesterday is correct.
Member for Naparima.
Mr. Prime Minister, based on what is in the public domain with respect to the MOU with Sandals, could the Prime Minister give a commitment that any tax breaks granted to Sandals in any final agreement will not transcend a change of government after 2020?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I am confused again, and I would like to ask my colleague to clarify the question before I try to answer it.
Is the Prime Minister binding future governments to tax concessions in any negotiation?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want the national community to listen very carefully to the kinds of questions being asked. I grew up in this country knowing that it was standard public policy in this country for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to enter into contracts. And one of the things that made this country a good place to invest is the sanctity of contracts in Trinidad and Tobago. So if it is that my colleague from Naparima is asking me that any arrangement that this government enters into is only binding until the next election, once again I will say to him, Madam Speaker, no thanks for your advice. The people of this country for decades have given all kinds of tax breaks to all kinds of businesses that transcend governments over and over. Where all you come from with this now? Where? There was an IDC in this country, Madam Speaker, that existed expressly for giving concessions to business investments in this country. All of a sudden, we have said not a word about what any tax breaks that will be given, except to say that we are giving Sandals, nothing of that nature. Sandals would be a project manager of a business owned by the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and whatever we give to that project, we give to ourselves. Why is that so hard to understand? But I'll tell you finally, if a contract is required to facilitate that through appropriate tax breaks, the government of Trinidad and Tobago will have no hesitation in doing it for the people of Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Caroni East.
Could the Prime Minister indicate whether the office of UDICOT is under the Prime Minister's office?
It does not. Wasn't such a question. Such a question was already asked by the member for Urupuchis. Member for Naparima.
Is the Prime Minister aware that almost every Caribbean government Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia have problems with agreements with Sandals engaged in and finalized, which give excessive tax breaks. And are you mindful?
One question. Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I noticed that he didn't call Jamaica and Bahamas and the US. Madam Speaker, whatever arrangement we make in Tobago, if we come to the point of making an arrangement, the only commitment I can give to the people of Trinidad and Tobago is that this government will make an agreement in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Questions.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Oropouche West, to the Minister of Works and Transport, with regard to the TT Spirit being pulled from servicing the Sea Bridge last Tuesday due to a cracked case, could the Minister indicate when the vessel will be properly repaired and returned to service?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the short answer is that the crank case was repaired on Friday, and the boat resumed service on Saturday and have been working since then. Thank you.
Point up here.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Supplemental. Minister, could you confirm if there's another vessel that was leased for the Sea Bridge service that is due to start soon?
Would not allow that as a supplementary question. Member for Oropouche.
Thank you very much. Minister, are you concerned with the statement of the Inter-Island Transport Committee of the Chamber of Commerce today that due to the challenges of the Sea Bridge, small and medium-sized businesses in Tobago are closing down?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam Speaker, to the best of my knowledge, I am not concerned with that statement. I have not seen any facts to show me that.
Minister, could you confirm whether or not a vessel named Champions Jet is coming in December to work the Sea Bridge?
I'm not going to allow that as a supplementary question. Member for Oropouche West.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the member for Oropouche West to the Minister of Health, in light of the recent increase of neonatal deaths at the San Fernando General Hospital, could the Minister indicate what is being done to prevent same from reoccurring?
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in answering this question, it pains me to give details which I will not normally give out of respect for the families. One baby was born at 29 weeks, 11 weeks preterm, was born with severe congenital anomalies, including brain defect, kidney defect, limbs, respiratory, ventilator dependent. That baby's life was incompatible with life. It grieves me to give these details, but the opposition doesn't seem to want to let this go. One baby was born at 26 weeks, 14 weeks early, at 500 grams. Madam Speaker, 500 grams is just over the weight of a bottle of water. This is 350 cc's. 1 cc is 1 gram. Could not survive. I keep telling this country we had a spate of preterm deliveries. One was born at 27 weeks, 1.3 kilograms with severe pulmonary hemorrhage. Could not survive. One was born with a combination of HIV and chlamydia infection passed on by the mother at preterm, incompatible with life. One was born preterm with MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus bacteria, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, unfortunately incompatible with life. One was born at 26 weeks at 710 grams pulmonary hemorrhage. Madam Speaker, it pains me to say this. It pains me. But I must congratulate the Newsday and Carol Matthew. This was the only media house that did a proper story on this by interviewing experts in the form of Dr. Catherine Minto-Bain. And I quote her. She said there are multiple factors that would cause preterm births, some of which were unknown. But things like being overweight when one gets pregnant, having high blood pressure, being diabetic, all of which are big problems in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental, member for Faisalabad.
For that response, Minister, can you indicate whether there's an increase in nosocomial infections within the NICU in San Fernando Hospital?
There is an increase in nosocomial infections at San Fernando because babies are being born with infections passed on by their mothers. But, Madam Speaker, let's look at the drastic decline in neonatal mortality under this administration. For the years 2010 to 2014, it averaged around 15 to 14 deaths per 1,000 live births. From 2015 to 2017, we have dropped that by 40%. The rate is now 8.8 deaths per 1,000 live births. We did that. We have surpassed our SDG goals of 9 per 1,000 by 2030 by achieving that in 2018. I keep telling the country that we have achieved our SDG goals in maternal mortality and neonatal mortality 12 years before 2030. 12 years. So we are doing fantastically well, but unfortunately in October and November, we did have this spate of preterm deliveries. I might also add many of these cases were sent by the private sector because they could not handle it. And we get these cases with no medical history. We don't know what drugs they are on. And that is what we do in the public sector now. And 2018 will go down in the history of this country with the lowest rate of maternal mortality deaths ever. Ever. Fantastic achievements. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental member for Barataris.
Just one question, Minister, I would like to find out. Are you still continuing the Maternal Review Committee recommendations that was done in 2015?
Thank you very much. Not only are we continuing it, but we have improved it with each cycle quarterly meeting that I have with the Director of Women's Health, where we review all the cases and I take an active part in that. So not only have we done it, government is a continuum. As the Prime Minister has just said, we will continue, make it better, and a future Minister of Health will take up the mantle that you started, and I accept it from you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are 6 questions for oral answer. We will be answering 4. Madam Speaker, we are requesting a deferral for 2 weeks of questions 12 and 13. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche West.
Question number 10 on behalf of the member for Oropouche West and the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the issues raised in this question are within the purview of the Environmental Management Authority and not the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And the EMA falls under the purview of the Ministry of Planning and Development. Madam Speaker, the EMA has advised that it investigated the reports of the disposal of oil into a tributary to the Caparo River in August and October 2018. On investigation, it was found that a trucking or transportation company was responsible for oil contamination in the waterways in Longdonville. There was a potential breach of an environmental requirement, namely the discharge of fluids into the municipal drain. The company met with the EMA on October 16, 2018, and admitted to the EMA that oil had been disposed into a pond on the site in an attempt to prevent the breeding of mosquitoes. At that meeting, the company agreed to clean the tributary. Madam Speaker, with reference to Part A, the EMA has confirmed at a site visit on October 26, 2018, that the tributary has been cleaned and no oil was observed in the pond. The EMA has advised that it observed that the regional corporation had begun cleaning the municipal drains. With reference to parts B, C, and D, the EMA has advised that these issues are being actively addressed.
Supplemental member for point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, could you confirm whether the trucking company or that contractor has been fined or fined for what he did?
Madam Speaker, those matters are being actively dealt with at this time.
Member for Oropouche West.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on behalf of the member for Oropouche West, question number 11 to the Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much again, Madam Speaker. The Ministry of Health, in collaboration with the Pan American Health Organization, is developing a multi-sectoral national suicide prevention strategy that identifies the following key measures being implemented and to be undertaken. Current initiatives: 1, presenting at health facilities. Persons who present with signs of an attempted suicide at the accident and emergency departments of public health facilities are treated and seen by a liaison psychiatrist on the ward with access to counseling, support groups, and psychotropic medication for the necessary social work intervention. 2, National Suicide Hotline. The National Suicide Hotline is fully operational 24/7 and supported by trained volunteers. 3, National Media Guidelines for Responsible Reporting on Suicide. The Ministry of Health recently launched the National Media Guidelines for Responsible Reporting on Suicide to guide reporters and editors on protecting the dignity of persons who have died and their family members, and to encourage help-seeking behavior for those considering suicide. 4, Mental Health Gap Action Program. The Ministry of Health has also rolled out the Mental Health Action Program that scales up services for mental, neurological, and substance abuse disorders in non-specialist settings. 5, strengthening of suicide surveillance. Strengthening of suicide surveillance for suicide reporting by formally standardizing, for the first time, a feasible compendium of mental health indicators and reporting tools. And 6, training and sensitization of key stakeholders, including the police service, teachers, primary care personnel, NGOs, faith-based organizations, and other key civil society organizations. Planned activities for 2019 to 2020. Developing an effective crisis health systems response for priority groups, including mentally ill patients, adolescent school-age population, postnatal mothers, persons with a previous suicide attempt, families of persons who have died by suicide, and persons experiencing trauma. 2, promotion of environmental and individual protective factors, such as effective coping skills, spiritual development, positive self-image and healthy self-esteem, access to effective parenting skills, supportive community networks, and opportunities for meaningful advocacy. 3, to improve the assessment and management of suicidal behavior by A, integrating the GAP program into the training of medical practitioners, implementing evidence-based clinical treatment protocols, and increasing access to rehabilitation for persons in recovery. 4, to improve the societal attitudes and beliefs and eliminate stigma towards people with mental disorders and persons who may exhibit suicidal behaviors. 5, strengthening leadership and increasing collaboration amongst key related sectors, including social development, education, sports, culture, and the general media. 6, finally, decriminalization of suicide for recognition of suicide as a public health problem and not a criminal offense. It is expected that these initiatives, with the adequate resources, should reduce the national suicide rate significantly over time. I thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental member for Faizabad.
Madam Speaker, Minister, thank you for that update. I was just wondering whether you can update us on if there are any active measures within the secondary school population, especially Form 4 and Form 5 and Form 6 students who are at risk?
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, and that's a very good question. And we piloted an initiative under the North Central Regional Health Authority, where we have actually gone into the schools. And I must thank publicly Dr. Asha Pemberton for leading that charge. And the response from teenagers has been positive, in that they are now seeing mental health as a spectrum of disorders. So yes, we are doing it. But Madam Speaker, I want to share some statistics to show where the figures are. And this is from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, because we have implemented some of these plans already. 2012, number of suicides, 106. 2013, 113. 2014, 104. 2015, 111. Well, listen to this now. Because we have implemented some of these things. 2016, 90. 2017, 103. And up to November of 2018, 69. So the rates are actually coming down over the past 2 to 3 years, because at the ministry we are paying significant attention to the issue of mental health. Madam Speaker, allow me the opportunity. In question time this morning in the UK Parliament, the point was made about cyberbullying and suicide. This is an issue that this country has to deal with. A question was put to Theresa May this morning from an MP from Scotland. A child killed themselves due to cyberbullying. This is something that we have to come to grips with, because it has the potential to get out of control. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Kamuta Manzanilla.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 14 to the Honourable Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A total of 18 shelters were operational in the aftermath of the flooding incident of October 19 to 21st, 2018, 11 of which were located in the eastern region. The National Family Services Division assigned 5 social workers to provide psychosocial support at the shelters. Counseling and psychosocial support were also provided to persons who required service outside of the shelters. During the period after the flood, several press releases and notices were disseminated by the ministry notifying persons of the availability of these services. Part B, as an agency offering free psychosocial support to citizens who have experienced trauma, the National Family Services Division continues to serve as a critical resource in helping citizens recover from natural and other disasters. This division received numerous calls from persons who identify themselves as victims of the flooding in the aftermath of the disaster. However, as at November 26, 2018, only one person requested counseling, and it was received and addressed by the National Family Services Division head office. The other requests were mainly for updates on flood relief applications. The ministry also provided support to the center established at Greenvale by the Housing Development Corporation. Social workers from the Ministry of Education also provided support at that center on a daily basis. 31 referrals for counseling were received by officers of the National Family Services Division for residents of the Greenvale community. However, of that figure, only 11 persons actually requested counseling. The others requested information on the status of their relief grants. The National Family Services Division continues to be available to lend psychosocial support to persons requesting such support, and persons can request the various services offered by the Family Services Division by contacting the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental question, Member for Kamuta Manzanilla.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Minister, in light of the response, is it, how does one access these services? Is it, in other words, is it available 24 hours? Is it available only Monday to Friday, 8 to 4? Can you advise, please?
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Once a request for counseling is received by the National Family Services Division, a social worker is assigned and arrangements are made with the person who has requested the counseling. It is generally provided between 8 and 4. However, if necessary, it is also provided on weekends.
Member for Faizabad.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 21 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Commissioner of Police has advised that the matter under reference was handled entirely by the Tunapuna Magistrates Court, which referred the couple for court-ordered counseling. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is cognizant of the fact that an employee's well-being and job performance could be affected by psychological issues. For example, suicidal, homicidal thoughts, addiction, mental disorders, and other psychosocial disorders. To demonstrate its commitment to promoting the health, safety, and welfare of all individuals employed in the organization, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service have the following measures in place. 1. The Police Academy provides training in peer counseling and some behavioral modules to assist supervisors and police officers in the detection of psychological and behavioral issues among colleagues. The Academy also provides peer counseling modules as part of the training for recruits, so they are also able to identify psychological issues among their peers. 2. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service introduced an employee assistance program with psychologists and psychiatrists within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Social Work Unit. Trinidad and Tobago Police Service provides training with the EAP staff in traumatic incident reduction, traumatology, cognitive behavioral therapy, and narrative therapy. Based on the training undertaken, supervisors, peers, and the EAP staff can detect psychological issues among police officers through the observation of any change in the officer's normal behavior. Deterioration in an officer's performance and/or behavior in the workplace. Other indicators of psychological issues result in referral to the EAP as a client. In the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, a supervisor can make a formal or informal referral of an officer to the EAP. Additionally, Madam Speaker, a peer can make a similar informal referral, or an officer can visit the EAP of his own or her own volition. It should be noted that all visits to the EAP are voluntary and not mandatory. The EAP undertakes 1. Prevention and education, example, seminars and psychoeducational workshops. 2. Direct psychosocial interventions, example, assessment and appropriate referrals, counseling, critical incident stress management. 3. Resource work, example, interviews, housing assistance, child placement, subject matter expert at meetings, seminars and committees, clergy services, etc. The EAP conducts psychoeducational programs intended to prevent the escalation of negative behavior. The training includes trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder in policing, emotional intelligence, assessing and managing risk of mental illness among employees, domestic violence, both male and female workshops, cognitive behavioral therapy, stress and motivational lectures, drug awareness programs, health and wellness, stress management, conflict resolutions, conflict management. The EAP provides critical services such as assessment and referral. Example, psychological tests for adults or psychoeducational testing for children and adolescents. Short-term and long-term problem resolutions, case management, and follow-up and critical incident stress management, Madam Speaker.
Faizabad.
Thank you for that response, Minister. While all of those will detect the problems after they've been, will treat the problem after they've been detected, my question is whether any consideration is being given to any sort of measure that will be mandatory screening or assessment of police officers on some sort of regular basis. Are you prepared to give some consideration to that?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I think within the answer that I gave, it's more on a voluntary nature and not mandatory to most of the incident.
Supplemental, Member for Faizabad.
I understand that, but I'm asking is, will consideration be given to mandatory testing? I understand it's all voluntary, the measures you described. Is that something you're prepared to consider?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I'm sure the Commissioner of Police is working on different areas to treat with the matter.
Supplementary member for Barataria-Sanwa.
Minister, could you indicate if, on recruitment, if there are any psychological profile assessments made on recruitment of police officers?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, on recruitment, I know that psychometric tests are conducted with the recruits. Yeah. Routine.
Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 17, I hereby request leave to move the adjournment of the House of Representatives at its sitting today for the purpose of discussing the following definite matter of urgent public importance, namely, the alarming increase in serious abuse and violence towards children. The matter is definite because of this alarming increase in serious abuse and extreme violence being perpetrated against children. The matter is urgent since the school and social support systems and structures existing in our country are woefully inadequate, slow, and painfully bureaucratic in helping these children. The matter is of public importance because of the increasing numbers of sexual abuse cases involving children, including as well children who are themselves perpetrators of crime. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under this standing order. I advise that a member may pursue this matter under Standing Order 16. Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 17, I hereby request leave to move the adjournment of the House of Representatives at this sitting today for the purpose of discussing the following definite matter of urgent public importance, namely, the reported deaths of 16 babies at the neonatal intensive care unit of the San Fernando General Hospital. The matter is definite because it pertains to the reported tragic deaths of the 16 neonates at the neonatal intensive care unit at the said hospital. The matter is of public importance because hundreds of pregnant women nearing delivery time who are going to be delivered at the San Fernando General Hospital, as well as at other major hospitals, are deeply concerned, anxious, and in fear over the possibility of loss of their newborns in light of the existing situation.
Honorable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under this standing order. I advise that the member pursues this matter under Standing Order 16.
Statements by ministers.
Honorable members, I have been advised that in accordance with Standing Order 126, there has been an agreement with regard to the speaking time allotted for statement by ministers to allow the Prime Minister to complete his statement on the policy with respect to the CSME. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Chief Whip and my colleagues for allowing, Madam Speaker.
Member for Urupuchi. Member for Urupuchi. I would just like you to retract what you just said there. Thank you very much. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And as I was about to say, I thank the Chief Whip and my colleagues on the other side for allowing me to make this statement. Madam Speaker, if one looks at a very brief history of the CARICOM single market and economy, one would see that it was an instrument that was conceived to facilitate economic development in the CARICOM, and its manifestation of the intent to deepen the integration process that began with the signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas in 1973. That treaty was later revised, and the community is now governed by the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas establishing the Caribbean Community, including the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, the CSME, which was signed by the heads of government in 2001. The CSME came into effect in January 2006 with the signing of the declaration by heads of government of the Caribbean Community, marking the coming into being of the CARICOM Single Market by the heads of government of Barbados, Belize, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines joined the single market several months later. The ultimate goal of the CSME, Madam Speaker, is to provide the foundation for growth and development through the creation of a single economic space for the production of competitive goods and services. There has been progress made in the implementation of the CSME. For example, the free movement of skilled CARICOM nationals has moved from 5 initial categories to 10. Those CARICOM nationals issued with skill certificates can move without the need to acquire work permits. Businesses can utilize the regimes under the right of establishment, as well as the movement of service providers and technical and supervisory and managerial staff to enhance their operations. Preference is given to trade in goods produced within the single market, and the application of a common external tariff, the CET, for goods entering from third states. The functioning of the single market has also been supported by a number of regional institutions that have been established for that purpose. Among them is the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, whose objective is to provide legal certainty to the operations of the CSME. CARICOM member states that participate in the single market subscribe to the original jurisdiction of the court. The CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, the CROSQ, and the Caribbean Agricultural Health Food Safety Agency, the CAHFSA, set the standards for goods in trade under the CSME, while the CARICOM Competition Commission aims to promote competition and protect consumers from firms abusing their dominant position in the market. Madam Speaker, what is the shape and structure of this CARICOM market? If I look at the 2014 GDP data, one would see, Madam Speaker, that Guyana has per capita income of $3,628. Belize, $4,617. Jamaica, $5,203. Dominica, $7,002. St. Vincent, $7,203. Suriname, $9,120. Antigua, $13,277. That's Antigua and Barbuda. Barbados, $15,454. And Trinidad and Tobago, with the highest per capita income of $18,798. In 2016, Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago exported just under $870 million to the OEC ECCO and imported under $50 million from them. This results in a large trade surplus of over $800 million in favor of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago, with our manufacturing and industrial base, also maintains similar favorable balance of trade with our other CARICOM neighbors of the MDCs, namely Jamaica, Barbados, and Guyana. In short, Madam Speaker, CARICOM is the major outlet for Trinidad and Tobago's manufactured products and is responsible for maintaining thousands of associated jobs and preservation of investments within Trinidad and Tobago. CARICOM is our market, and we must do everything reasonable to protect its existence, its health, and its growth. Over the years, Madam Speaker, member states have lamented the slow progress in the implementation of decisions of the conference. Further, the CSME matters were not being treated in a sustained and consistent fashion at recent heads of government meeting. To advance the single market, much work remains to be done in areas pertinent to legislative reforms and administrative arrangements in the 5 core regimes, namely the free movement of goods, the free movement of capital, the free movement of skills, the free movement of services, and the right to establishment of a business. Work is also ongoing in the regulatory and supporting areas such as competition, consumer protection, and intellectual property. In framing the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, certain areas were identified for further elaboration within the scope of the single market, such as government procurement, free circulation, and electronic commerce. It is against this backdrop that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, at the 38th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM in July 2017, called for the convening of a special meeting to have a comprehensive discussion on the CSME. This proposal found favor with other heads who agreed at the 29th intersessional meeting of the conference in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, February 26, 27, 2018, that such a meeting should be convened. This decision was reinforced at the 39th regular meeting of CARICOM heads of government in July 2018 in Montego Bay, Jamaica, where it was agreed that a special meeting of the conference of the CSME be held in Trinidad and Tobago in November 2018. That meeting, Madam Speaker, took place in the first week of December 2018. The special meeting was served as an important watershed forum where heads took decisions on definitive CSME matters which have been outstanding for over a decade. The national interest of Trinidad and Tobago resides and is well served in a strong and thriving integration movement. Trinidad and Tobago has regained its leadership position in CARICOM, Madam Speaker. The 18th special meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM on the CSME was convened in Port-au-Spain, as I said, on December 3rd and 4th. At the meeting, member states reaffirmed their commitment to the integration movement, to CARICOM, and to taking heightened action towards the full implementation of the CSME. The Sentence Declaration was issued at the conclusion of the above-mentioned special meeting. The main decisions contained therein are as follows, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, the Sentence Declaration is as follows. We, the heads of government of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, meeting at Port-au-Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, 3rd to 4th December 2018, on the occasion of the 18th special meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM, recalling the 1989 Declaration of Grandance, which initiated the process towards the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, the CSME, the signing of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas in 2001, which established the CSME, and the launch of the CSME in 2006, convinced that the CSME continues to be the most viable platform for supporting growth and development in the member states of CARICOM, recognizing the need to make it more closely attuned to the needs and priorities of member states, and contributing more visibly to growth and development and to the welfare of the people of the community, having reviewed its progress and acknowledged that it should have been further advanced, having considered the report of the Commission to review Jamaica's relations within CARICOM and CARIFORUM frameworks, having also considered the perspectives of the member states of the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, underscoring the critical role of the CARICOM Development Fund, the CDF, in supporting the CSME, having exchanged views with the representatives of the private sector and labor, and encouraged by their commitment to the regional integration project and their recommendations for the enhancement of the CSME, recognizing that the goal of our regional integration process is to enhance the well-being of all the citizens of our community, declare we are committed to take action at the national level to advance the regional integration agenda. We are determined to ensure the equitable distribution among the peoples of the community of the gains realized through the regional integration process. We have agreed on a formalized, structured mechanism to facilitate dialogue between the councils of the community and the private sector and labor. We have also agreed to amend the treaty to include the associate institutions representative bodies of private sector and labor. We have agreed that in accordance with Article 50 of the revised treaty, which deals with the principle of accelerated implementation, that the principle will be applied to any initiative which is consistent with the revised treaty. We agreed that those member states so willing would move forward towards full free movement within the next 3 years. We have mandated that steps be taken to deepen cooperation and collaboration between the secretariats of CARICOM and the OECS to avoid duplication and maximize the utility of scarce resources. We will enforce the operation of our security mechanisms to ensure the integrity of the regime, allowing the free movement of CARICOM nationals. We will examine the reintroduction of the single domestic space for passengers in the region. We have agreed to work towards having a single security check for direct transit passengers on multi-stop intra-community flights. We will conduct a special session on air and maritime transportation at the intersessional meeting of the conference in February 2019 to focus on this critical aspect of integration as a whole and the CSME in particular. We will include agricultural workers, beauty service practitioners, barbers, and security guards to the agreed categories of skilled nationals who are entitled to move freely and seek employment within the community. We reiterate that skills certificates issued by one member state would be recognized by all member states. We will complete legislative and other arrangements in all member states for all categories of free movement of skilled persons. We will finalize the regime that permits citizens and companies of the community to participate in public procurement processes in member states by the year 2019. We will take all necessary steps to allow for mutual recognition of companies incorporated in a CARICOM member state. We have mandated the Community Council to develop appropriate recommendations on the proposal for the introduction of a regime of sanctions for the consideration of the conference. We welcome Haiti's commitment to the full integration into the CSME by 2020. We have appointed Professor Avinash Prasad to lead a restructured commission on the economy to advise member states on a growth agenda for the community. The members of the Commission of the Economy, the CCE, are Professor Avinash Prasad from the Barbados Government Special Advisory on the Economy, Mr. Chester Humphrey, Trade Union Leader from Grenada, Dr. Damian King, Senior Lecturer in the Department of Economics, the UWI Mona, Jamaica, Mr. Gregory Maguire, Senior Manager Office of Strategy Management, National Gas Company, Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Roger McLean, Research Fellow, Health Economics, UWI St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Wendell Samuel, Program Coordinator of the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Mr. P.B. Scott, Chairman of the Musson Group, Jamaica. Ms. Therese Turner-Jones, General Manager of the Country Department, Caribbean Group, IDB, the Bahamas. Ms. Ngozi Okonye-Iweala, I trust that I pronounced that appropriately. Co-chair of the Global Commission for the Economy and Climate and former Finance Minister of Nigeria. Mr. Pascal Lamy, former Director General of the World WTO in France. Madam Speaker, that brings us to the next steps. Given the intent to bring new impetus to the implementation of the CSME, the following outlines the next steps for Trinidad and Tobago on a number of key commitments in the St. Anne's Declaration. 1, commitments made with regard to the freedom of movement of persons. In declaration, member states committed to, quote, move towards full free movement within the next 3 years by 2021 for those willing. Once ratified, Trinidad and Tobago would be required to undertake a comprehensive review of the relevant legislative and administrative frameworks governing the entry and stay of CARICOM nationals, as well as benefits to be accorded to them. 2, commitments made with regard to the free movement of skilled community nationals. We are to include agricultural workers, beauty service practitioners, barbers, and security guards to the agreed categories of skilled CARICOM nationals who are entitled to move freely and seek employment within the community. We are to reiterate that a skill certificate issued by one member should be recognized by all member states, and complete legislative and other arrangements in all member states for all categories within the framework of the free movement of skills of persons. Fulfillment of these commitments require that Trinidad and Tobago amend its existing legislation. The Immigration Caribbean Community Skilled Nationals Act to include inter alia the expanded categories of skilled CARICOM nationals, the recognition of skill certificates issued by other CARICOM member states, and authorization of the benefits to be extended to spouses and dependents of skilled certificate holders as outlined in the Protocol on Contingent Rights. 3, implementation of a single transport space for community nationals. In accordance with the St. Anne's Declaration, the conference agreed to examine the reintroduction of the single domestic space for passengers in the region, to work towards having a single security check for direct transit passengers on multi-stop intra-community flights, and to conduct a special session on the air and maritime at the intersessional meeting in February 2019. The next steps for Trinidad and Tobago include ratification of MASA, which is the Multi-Access Security Multi-Agreement Security Agreement. Multi-Access Security Agreement, MASA. Multi-Access Security Agreement, MASA. Conduct of consultations for the development of national policy positions for deliberations at the regional level. Allocation of adequate resources for the regional security apparatus, and ensure effective preparation for and representation at the special session of the Air and Maritime Transportation at the intersessional meeting in St. Kitts in February 2019. 4, the commitment for the mutual recognition of companies incorporated in a CARICOM member state. Trinidad and Tobago will be required to conduct stakeholder consultations for the purpose of considering the existing CARICOM model legislation and formulating comments thereon. These comments would then be transmitted to the CARICOM Secretariat for circulation to other member states and discussion within the relevant organs at the regional level. With respect to signature and CARICOM instruments, Madam Speaker, it should be noted that the following CARICOM instruments were signed by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago at the special meeting. 1. Host Country Agreement for CARIFESTA 14, 2019. The Host Country Agreement for CARIFESTA 14 outlines the legal and operational framework for the management and staging of CARIFESTA in Trinidad and Tobago during the period August 16 to 25, 2019. 2. CARICOM Arrest Warrant Treaty. The CARICOM Arrest Warrant Treaty establishes within CARICOM a system of arrests and surrender of requested persons for the purpose of A, conducting a criminal prosecution for an applicable offense, or B, executing a custodial sentence where the requested persons have fled from justice after being sentenced for an applicable offense. 3. CARICOM Multilateral Air Services Agreement, MASA. The CARICOM Multilateral Air Services Agreement focuses on the exchange of route and traffic rights within the community, within the context of the goal of the community transport policy, which is to, and I quote, to provide adequate, safe, and internationally competitive transport services for the development and consolidation of the CARICOM single market and economy, unquote. To this end, the MASA seeks to give effect to the Community of Interest Principles, the COIP, towards the achievement of a single domestic space for transportation. This principle allows any CARICOM state that does not have a national airline the right to designate another CARICOM state airline to operate on its behalf. This has far-reaching consequences for Caribbean Airlines, Madam Speaker. And fourthly, Protocol on Contingent Rights and the accompanying provisional application. The Protocol on Contingent Rights and the accompanying provisional application denotes the benefits to be extended to the holders of CARICOM skill certificates, as well as their spouses and dependents within participating member states. Madam Speaker, what are the benefits in summary? The single economic space, comprising the market infrastructure and the macroeconomic policy framework and environment, is intended to stimulate greater production, improved efficiency and competitiveness, production integration, higher levels of domestic and foreign investment, increased employment, expansion of intra-regional trade, particularly in inputs and intermediate goods, and provide a platform for accessing extra-regional markets. The CSME is therefore intended to better position member states to grow by having access to and using the resources of the region as a whole, rather than relying only on the resources of the particular member state. Fundamentally, Madam Speaker, it is intended to support sustained improvement in the standard of living, increased employment and opportunities for employment for all CARICOM nationals. Under successive PNM governments, Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago has a proud legacy of championing and supporting the vision of regional integration, and this government has resurrected this idea and has returned our country to the forefront of the leadership efforts that are required to advance not only the interests as described, but the interests of all our Caribbean brothers and sisters in these Caribbean island homes, where Trinidad and Tobago stand to benefit more than most. Madam Speaker, I thank you for that.
Member for Caroni Central.
Madam Speaker, may I, under 24(4), ask a question? Prime Minister, I didn't hear you mention in your statement anything about ICT or telecommunications. Nevertheless, I ask, what, in your opinion, are the prevailing conditions now that will allow for this acceleration of the matters that you mentioned in CARICOM that did not exist before?
Sir?
Madam Speaker, firstly, I must say that I'm sure somewhere in there I mentioned one of the imperatives was the technology and commerce. But the question, I think, is more directed to the whole position on the single ICT space. That, Madam Speaker, is a priority, and it is one of the initiatives that is identified and is being actioned, championed by the government of Grenada. So it is not left out, and maybe I did not go into details on it, but there's a phrase in here that catches it, and we did spend some time discussing it, and there's agreement and enthusiasm for the single ICT space. And with respect to, what's the other point?
What are the...
Oh, why something would happen now? Madam Speaker, if I may quote the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and a position that was one of the preparatory exercises for this meeting that took place last week was that a small group led by former Secretary General Edwin Carrington and a couple other specialist persons did a paper for myself and the Prime Minister of Barbados as to why we have failed to do what we are now trying to do. And in that paper, I think on 3 occasions it was mentioned that there was a failure of the political will.
That's right.
And heads were confronted with that at the meeting, that it was a failure of the political will of the leadership of the region why we have not made the steps that were promised by our potential. The group of leaders in CARICOM now have been asked, how are we going to be held accountable? And the Prime Minister of Jamaica answered that question, saying that we have made declarations, as I have just made here to this Parliament, we have made declarations, unanimous declarations last week, to the people of the region that we will do these things, and we are to be held accountable by the people of the region for carrying out those commitments.
Personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Variation of Certain Duties and Taxes and to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature and for related matters be now read a second time. Before you, Madam Speaker, this afternoon is the Finance Bill 2018. The bill is aimed at putting in place fiscal measures and matters related that were announced in this Honourable House on October the 1st, 2018 in the budget statement. I will also put before you and this House certain other matters that were not mentioned on that day. These matters, nevertheless, will go towards the implementation of the plans and initiatives outlined in the 2019 budget statement and government policy. In 2014, Madam Speaker, our nation suffered a significant blow to its economy owing to a decline in oil and gas prices and oil and gas production, as revenue from petroleum plunged by $10 billion between 2014 and 2015, and by a further $10 billion thereafter. A financial crisis from which we are still recovering. As a direct result, there was an immediate requirement to stabilize the economy by taking viable steps to facilitate sustainable growth and development. Since 2015, and upon taking office, we have worked assiduously to achieve this goal. In keeping with government's policy to restore growth, diversity, and confidence in the economy, and after several years of economic stagnation, the economic indicators signal that Trinidad and Tobago's economy will grow in real terms by 1.9% in 2018. This growth inspired the theme of the 2019 budget statement turnaround, as it adequately captures the recent progression of the economy and adequately reflects a commitment to put the economy of Trinidad and Tobago back on a sustainable path. It shows, Madam Speaker, that we have begun to deliver on our promise to the citizens in the 2018 budget statement, and we have in fact changed the economic paradigm with the resumption of real economic growth in 2018. The turnaround in our economy can be attributed to developments in the energy sector, reinforced by developments in the non-energy sector, and improved macroeconomic conditions. This has led to the inflation rate of Trinidad and Tobago being recorded at 1% in August 2018. This is a vast improvement from the forecasted 2018 average for all Caribbean countries of 4.5% inflation and the average rate of 7.2% inflation recorded in Trinidad and Tobago over the last 50 years. Again, Madam Speaker, this is consistent with the theme turnaround. As part of this administration's commitment to deliver on our promises to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we saw the need for greater public involvement in the generation of revenue. Accordingly, through our very innovative revenue-raising measure, we offered the unique National Investment Fund NIF bond, which led to a $4 billion injection into our economy. It is against this backdrop of prudent and careful financial management, well-targeted and realistic spending, and innovative ideas for revenue generation, such as NIF, that the Finance Bill 2018 is presented. I will now take the opportunity to deal with the bill itself in its entirety, which will implement certain measures outlined in the 2019 budget statement, in addition to other policy matters. Given the nature of the provisions and the bunching, I do not intend to proceed with the clauses in sequence, but in groups. I shall now examine the clauses of the bill before this House. Clause 1 is self-explanatory and needs no further explanation except to say it contains a short title of the bill. Clause 33 is the commencement provision, containing the date from which the provisions of the Act will come into force. All the clauses except for Clause 26B will come into operation on January 1st, 2019. Clause 26B, which provides for a threshold on the exemption from tax with respect to severance pay, will come into effect on November 30th, 2018. It is in fact already in effect through the operation of Section 124 of the Income Tax Act. I propose to address firstly the measures contained in the bill that form part of the 2019 budget statement. Pensions. Interim pension to public officers. I would like to treat first with the 10 clauses of this bill which amend various pieces of legislation to give effect to an interim pension for public servants and other relevant persons. These clauses are as follows. Clause 2 amends the Retiring Allowances Legislative Service Act, Chapter 203. Clause 6 amends the Judges' Salaries and Pensions Act, Chapter 602. Clause 8 amends the Prison Service Act, Chapter 1302. Clause 10 amends the Retiring Allowances Diplomatic Service Act, Chapter 1704. Clause 13 amends the Pensions Act, Chapter 2352. Clause 14 amends the Widows and Orphans Pension Act. Clause 16 amends the Municipal Corporations Pension Act, Chapter 2505. Clause 20 amends the Fire Service Act, Chapter 3550. Clause 21 amends the Teachers Pension Act, Chapter 3902. And Clause 22 amends the Assisted Secondary School Teachers Pension Act, Chapter 3903. Madam Speaker, as I indicated in the budget statement, a number of public servants face financial burdens post-retirement given the decline of disposable income and change in employment status. These constraints are usually compounded by delay and by the extended delivery of pensions to public officers after years of dedicated service. It is therefore proposed by the amendments in the clauses itemized above, the ones I have just gone through, that until final pensions and gratuities are determined, public officers be given an interim pension in the sum of $3,500 per month immediately upon their compulsory retirement. This interim pension will be coupled with the $3,000 NIS pension per month, so that in total, public servants can immediately get a total of $6,500 per month. Through this measure, public servants, inclusive of those in the civil, teaching, protective services, and the legislature, who have attained the age for compulsory retirement and are otherwise eligible, are afforded temporary financial relief from the date that their pension becomes due as they await their full pensionable disbursement. We have put some conditions. In order to receive this interim pension, public servants must have retired compulsorily, are entitled to pensions, and have a minimum of 10 years service. I wish to reiterate, Madam Speaker, that this measure is intended to be temporary in nature. There will be an aggressive move in 2019 to approve the efficacy and completeness of the pension and leave records system to ensure the prompt payment of pensions to public servants upon retirement. In this regard, the Ministry of Finance is at an advanced stage of improving the administrative arrangements to enable a much more efficient system, thereby ensuring that pensions are paid on time. It is noteworthy that there are two groups of persons not covered by the pieces of legislation listed above, to whom this measure must apply. Those persons are members of the Defense Force and Police Service. And in order to provide for the interim pension of $3,500 to these categories of persons, the Defense Pensions, Terminal and Other Grants Regulations and the Police Service Regulations will be amended at a later date so that those persons in the protective services and the Defense Force can receive the pension amount, the police service actually. Senior citizens pension. Although not forming part of the clauses in this bill, I would like to signal that changes will be made to the schedule under the Senior Citizens Pensions Act, Chapter 3202. The schedule will be amended to introduce a new band to treat with the income qualification. The changes will effectively increase the cap for eligibility for the senior citizen pension from $5,000 to $6,000 and will put an additional $1,000 into the pockets of approximately 25,000 elderly people. The amendment of the schedule will be done by way of an order signed by the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, subject to negative resolution of Parliament. This measure will come into effect in this way on January 1st, 2019. Disability assistance. The Public Assistance Act, Chapter 3203, provides for access to public assistance for the needs of a child who has a physical or mental disability. A child with such a disability must be living in a household where the household income is deemed inadequate. This benefit is presently found at Regulation 3A-D, Public Assistance Regulations. It is proposed, Madam Speaker, to amend the legislation to provide that a child who is under the age of 18 years shall receive the disability assistance instead of or shall be eligible to receive the disability assistance instead of the public assistance now payable under the regulations. The disability assistance to be paid for a person under 18 will now be in the amount of $1,500 per month. This will require an amendment to the substantive part of the Act under Section 11A, dealing with disability assistance, to provide for the payment of the disability amount. Additionally, certain fundamental amendments will be made to the Act to provide for, among other things, the transitioning of recipients from the public assistance to disability assistance. There will also be provision in the substantive part of the Act to allow for recipients under 18 years of age and guidelines to be made by the Minister with responsibility for social development and family services for the purpose of efficient and effective administration of the disability assistance. It is also proposed to amend the Public Assistance Act to increase the amount of disability assistance for recipients 18 years and over from $1,800 as it is now to $2,000. These amendments can be found at clause 18 of the bill. Tax benefit measures, business levy. This bill provides for a number of tax incentives to individuals. One of the first such incentives will be an amendment to Section 5A2C of the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501, to provide equity in taxation between the Income Tax Act and the Corporation Tax Act, Chapter 7502, in respect of the business levy. The threshold for a self-employed individual subject to business levy will now be increased from $200,000 to $360,000. This increase will bring the business levy threshold for self-employed persons in line with the business levy threshold for companies. In other words, the gross receipts and sales of a person making gross receipts and sales not exceeding $360,000 will not be subject to business levy. This benefit to the self-employed can be found at clause 26A of the bill. Exemption from tax on severance pay. Madam Speaker, at clause 26B, section 56A, the Income Tax Act, is being amended. This amendment allows for an increase in the exemption from tax on severance pay from $300,000 to $500,000. It allows for a person under a contract of employment who receives severance pay to benefit from a higher threshold that will be exempt from tax. Madam Speaker, the payment of severance to a departing employee, whether due to redundancy or ill health, is a supportive gesture of the employer, and in respect of redundancy is a legal necessity. Severance payments cushion an employee's recent employment and is a means through which terminated employees can maintain their standard of living. With this in mind, the decision was made to provide some well-needed relief to any affected individual. This measure took effect on November 30th, 2018. As you may know, it is a benefit to any person who, having met the criteria under the Income Tax Act, that they will be eligible for severance pay and hence the exemption. In view of the fact that the exemption is a benefit and not a burden, there is no need for a special majority for the retroactive applicability of this measure. However, what I would say is that under Section 124 of the Income Tax Act, the President, meaning the Cabinet, is empowered to exempt any tax in any situation if it considers it just and equitable to do so. And on November the 29th, at its regular Cabinet meeting, the Cabinet agreed to increase the threshold for exemption from income tax for workers who have been terminated or made redundant from $300,000, their severance payments from $300,000 to $500,000, and that was immediately effective at that point in time. And if you go, sure.
There are the two provisions, which is the one that you're now amending in the Income Tax Act, and the 126 where the President has the power. Having utilized that section, I guess you did it in order to facilitate the payments to veteran workers, their severance payments. Is it necessary that you now amend this? If you have that provision there, is it necessary to amend it? And if yes, what are the consequences of this? Or is it that both, I'm asking legally, is it that each would be, one can use either provision in certain circumstances? Or is it that that 126 and this one here, 56A, that it seems to be one Oshios, if that's the correct pronunciation. So I seek your advice.
Certainly. Firstly, it's Section 124 of the Income Tax Act, not Section 126. And there are some very innovative lawyers on your side. And we would not want to leave innovative. And we would not, Madam Speaker, want to leave any loophole for one of those innovative lawyers to try and upset this matter. So we felt, for the avoidance of doubt, not only would the Cabinet utilize Section 124 of the Income Tax Act, that is empowered so to do, and therefore the severance exemption was increased to $500,000 from November 30th. And if you go on the income tax, the Board of Inland Revenue, or the Inland Revenue Division, I believe is the proper terminology now. If you go to their website, you will see that as of November 30th, the threshold for exemption from income tax of severance pay was increased to $500,000. But we are making doubly sure that it is both in the substantive part of the Act and in the operative part of the Act. The operative part of the Act, the 124, is discretionary. So we just, for the avoidance of doubt, we don't want any smart lawyer to come and say that if you want to utilize 124, you have to name all the people and state all the amounts and so on. So we don't want a smart lawyer to do that. Well, that's okay. As far as the Cabinet is concerned, and as far as our legal advisors are concerned, and based on the advice of the Attorney General and the Treasury Solicitor, the utilization of Section 124 is perfectly legal and in effect. But as I said, we don't want any smart lawyer to come and tie up the situation. So that is why we are doing both. So it is certainly not OCOs. It is, in fact, very, very important that we do that. So, Madam Speaker, I have indicated that we have made the change, and we are making the change to that particular section of the Income Tax Act, which would allow now for henceforth the increase in the threshold for severance pay, the exemption from $300,000 to $500,000, to be actually codified in the Income Tax Act. And this is separate and apart from the utilization of Section 124 that we did on November 29th. With respect to tertiary education, Madam Speaker, Clause 26C of the bill amends Section 10(9) of the Income Tax Act, as this particular amendment deals not only with the increasing of fines and penalties, but rather allows for an increase in the allowance for tertiary education expenses from the current $60,000 per year to $72,000 a year, to take into account the prohibitive costs of overseas education. This benefit is aimed at investing in our nation's children. We firmly believe that in order to build a prosperous and successful future for our country, we need an educated and productive workforce. And this measure is in furtherance of this belief. This measure will benefit a number of students, especially those from working and vulnerable households, thereby improving the livelihood and well-being of our nation as a whole. Stamp duty threshold. As indicated in the budget statement, home ownership is one of the greatest accomplishments a person can hope to achieve in their lifetime. It offers a sense of stability and security. However, few are able to achieve home ownership status, given the increasing cost of real estate. This point is further compounded and illustrated by the thousands of applications received by the Housing Development Corporation for affordable government housing, which has led to a demand that is far greater than the available supply. Whenever I hear the numbers, Madam Speaker, I'm always a bit taken aback. Over 100,000 applications for housing.
170.
Yeah.
170.
Well, over 100,000. In furtherance of the aim to make home ownership more accessible, Clause 27 will amend the Stamp Duty Act, Chapter 7601. The aim of this amendment is to facilitate accessibility and affordability of first-time home ownership. As a result, Madam Speaker, now exempt from stamp duty are deeds in respect of conveyances or transfers on sale of any property where the value of the consideration for sale does not exceed $1.5 million. In addition, this clause also exempts from stamp duty mortgage deeds in respect of property where the sum secured by the mortgage does not exceed $1.5 million. Sure?
Thank you very much. When you spoke about helping first home owners, this is Clause 27, I think it's a laudable effort. certainly one that is not objectionable. But I wonder if you may want to consider 27E, where it says the property is or includes a dwelling house. So therefore, a person is even in a worse position, not being able to buy land and the house on top of it. That person would be excluded here, but they may be in a worse off position. I'm asking if you'll kindly consider that it is to be used, which you have it there, mainly for a dwelling house. So say you have a young couple, they can buy a piece of land which is cheaper than buying house and land, and then they can use the land as collateral for a mortgage and start building. So I'm asking if you would kindly consider using the a slightly wider definition, where the properties be used mainly for, as you have it here, or only for a dwelling house. You don't have to answer now, you can at the committee stage.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I don't know if the Honourable Leader of the Opposition intends to speak in this debate. I don't know if the Honourable Member's contribution will be by way of interruptions and interjections, but it's okay. It's okay. Let me just move on to this point, Madam Speaker. I was about to make the point. The first schedule of the Stamp Duty Act, by way of amendment, will provide that an application can be made to the Board of Inland Revenue in the approved form with the requisite evidence in support in order to benefit from the exemption. The criteria for the benefit is where the first-time homeowner is acquiring property, as I indicated, that is or includes a dwelling house to be used wholly or mainly for residential purposes, and the cost of said property does not exceed $1.5 million. Questions may be asked why we are exempting only first-time property owners. In answer, I wish to emphasize that priority must always be given to first-time homeowners, and this measure is an incentive geared towards making first-time home acquisition more affordable and attainable, especially for young families. This measure will save first-time homeowners up to $37,000 in stamp duty and will benefit up to 1,000 families a year. And if you do the maths, Madam Speaker, we are talking about a loss of revenue to the government of up to $37 million per year. Now, the question of land. The cost of land, by definition, will always be less than the cost of land and buildings. There's a completely different stamp duty regime for land. The current stamp duty on land is 7%, but that 7% is on a smaller amount because it's for the value of the land itself and not on the house on the land. There is merit in looking at this, but one must understand the economic realities facing this country. By this exemption, increasing the amount from $850,000, as it now stands, to $1.5 million, the Treasury is losing $37 million. We felt that $37 million was a gift that we could give to first-time homeowners. If we now extend that benefit or a similar benefit or a partial benefit to purchase of land for the purpose of constructing a dwelling, that will result in a further loss of income. So there's something we need to look at very carefully. What I would say is that there is merit in looking at it, and we will certainly look at what the loss of revenue would be if we were to exempt land for the purpose of constructing a dwelling house, and perhaps the Member of Parliament for Siparia is looking into my mind and looking at what I may do in the 2020 budget. But Madam Speaker, there is merit in this suggestion. We will certainly consider it very, very, very seriously. Tax compliance measures. Registration of Clubs Act, Chapter 2101. I now turn my attention to Clause 11, which deals with the increase in the rate of interest for late payment of taxes by members' clubs, governed by the Registration of Clubs Act, Chapter 2101. The Registration of Clubs Act will be amended at Section 23(8)(b) by increasing the rate of interest for late payments from 15% to 20% per annum. This step was taken in order to harmonize late payment interest rates under the legislation administered by the Board of Inland Revenue. So for years, the the rate of interest on late payment of taxes has been 20%, but for the registration of clubs, so-called casinos, it was left at 15%, probably as an administrative oversight. So this is simply to harmonize what the interest rate should be for late payment of taxes. In keeping with the theme of tax compliance, consideration must be given to clauses 26D and E of the bill. These clauses, sub-clauses, seek to amend certain sections of the Income Tax Act in order to provide for the increase in existing fines and penalties contained in the Act that are regarded as not sufficient to be a deterrent. Section 98(2)B will be amended to increase the fine from $3,000 to $10,000 where a person fails to file a declaration as required by the section or files a declaration that contravenes the section. Another amendment will be made to Section 119 of the Income Tax Act to increase the fine for the offenses in respect of fraud from $50,000 to $250,000. Again, consistent with what was announced in the budget, the penalties under the Litter Act will be increased. Clause 17 of the bill amends the Litter Act by increasing the penalties contained therein. The Act was enacted in order to protect the environment from the harmful effects of reckless disposal of waste and effluent. We are still dealing with some of these harmful effects. Madam Speaker, most recently, challenges related to flooding is one of these harmful effects. As a result, all penalties under the Litter Act will be increased by 100% from January 1st, 2019. This will see penalties in the Act increase from as low as they currently are at $400 for minor offense to $800, and as high as $800 to $1,600. Penalties under the Children Act. I wish to draw your attention to Clause 23 of the bill, which amends the Children Act, Chapter 4601, to provide for an increase in all fines for offenses committed pursuant to the Act by 100%. This is in direct response to statistics reported by the Children's Authority, who reported that during the period May 18, 2015 to April 30, 2018, 14,581 cases of child abuse were reported. As a result, the fines have been increased on the lower end of the spectrum from $3,000 to $6,000 for minor offenses, and at the higher end for more serious offenses, fines under the Children's Act have been increased from $100,000 to $200,000. Again, the severity of the offense will determine the fine. And this is consistent with the commitment of this government to foster the development of our children, as seen in our Vision 2030 statement. Agricultural fires. During the budget statement, I informed this House that fire authorities have advised that in the past 5 years, over 9,000 bush and forest fires occurred, with the major contributors being individuals. In response, Clause 24 will amend the Agricultural Fires Act by increasing the fine imposed on persons found guilty of offenses under the Act from $1,500 to $20,000. It is envisaged that this will deter citizens from doing acts that lead or contribute to bushfires and other destructive behavior giving rise to offenses under the Act. Credit exposure. The amendments to the Financial Institutions Act, Chapter 7909, and Insurance Act, Number 4 of 2018, found that clauses 28 and 29 of the bill are aimed at increasing the credit exposure limits of licensed financial institutions and insurance companies. This will allow the financial institution or insurer to ensure credit exposure in the form of an investment bond in an aggregate amount of up to 50% of its capital base. The amendments are in direct response to concerns raised by financial institutions and insurance companies that were interested at the time in participating in the fixed-rate bonds issued on July 9, 2018 by the National Investment Fund Holding Company, NIF. Concerns were raised that while the intended level of participation of those interested is permissible under the current Insurance Act, should the new Insurance Act be proclaimed during the life of any series of the bonds, then the proposed level of participation would no longer be sanctioned. The amendments to both the Financial Institutions Act and the New Insurance Act will also introduce certain criteria related to any bond in which a financial institution and insurer would invest. The criteria include, but are not limited to, the bond being fully funded and denominated in Trinidad and Tobago dollars, has an investment grade rating from a credit rating agency approved by the central bank, and is issued by a company incorporated in Trinidad and Tobago, wholly owned and controlled by Corporation Sole. So this is specific to government bond issues or bond issues from government companies. This will require consequential amendments for other sections in the two pieces of legislation in order to provide for consistency. These amendments are found at clauses 28 and 29 of the bill. Madam Speaker, could I know how much time I have left?
You have 12 minutes, and 12 minutes exactly.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Yeah. Madam Speaker, I also wish to say at this time we have some amendments to tidy up certain clauses in the bill, and the Attorney General will address those amendments in his contribution. I now wish to put before the House other matters that did not form part of the 2019 budget statement, two of which I am sure honourable members opposite will support. Clause 15 amends the Municipal Corporations Act 2504 to permit a council to deposit and withdraw from the mayor's fund such monies, fees, and charges collected by the corporation as the minister with the responsibility for finance may authorize. Madam Speaker, I am constantly bombarded, even tormented, by officials from regional corporations across the whole spectrum, government and opposition, to assist them in dealing with utilization of monies in the mayor's fund, deposits into and withdrawals from. And there is so much interpretation and misinterpretation of the sections that we have simply had enough. So we are now changing it to make it crystal clear that councils may deposit into their mayor's fund such monies, fees, and charges collected by the corporations as the minister with the responsibility for finance may authorize. So that the council will collect its fees and so on, and with the approval of the Minister of Finance can now deposit these into the mayor's fund and withdraw from the mayor's fund. The other one is even more important.
The excess fund, surplus.
I wouldn't call that an echo, Madam Speaker, because I haven't spoken yet. I don't know what it is. The Municipal Corporations Act, this is the one that I had to deal with. It's further amended at section 1122 to treat with surplus amounts in the corporation fund. It is the intention that the surplus, with the consent of the minister and under the direction of the council, may be applied for the improvement of the municipality and for the service and benefit of its inhabitants. We've taken out all the convoluted language in the Municipal Corporations Act that talks about land and buildings, removed all of it. And we have simply put a provision that corporations will now be allowed to use their unspent balances for the improvement of the municipality and for the service and benefit of its inhabitants. You can't get better than that. And no public servant now could interpret or misinterpret this to suit themselves. Now every corporation, whether UNC or PNM, will be able to use its unspent balances for the service and benefit of its inhabitants. I am sure we will get the support of the opposition for this. Clause 12 amends the National Lotteries Act, Chapter 2104, at Section 9, to extend the powers to and duties of the National Lotteries Control Board. The clause renumbers the Section 9 as Section 9.1 and inserts a new subsection 2 that authorizes the board to facilitate the payment of money to public bodies by electronic means. This will allow for ease of payment where the need arises. In this amended section, the term public body is given the same meaning assigned under Section 4 of the Public Procurement Act. Conservation of wildlife. Clause 25 of the bill amends the Conservation of Wildlife Act. by increasing the penalties contained therein. The amendments seek to maintain the wildlife population and prevent the illegal killing, wounding, capturing, and pursuing of wildlife. It increases the penalties for various hunting-related offenses under the Act. Fines have been increased in ranges from as low as 100 to 1,500 and as high as 200 to 10,000. The seriousness of the offense will determine the fine. State Liability and Proceedings Act will be amended in Section 27(1) by Clause 7 of the bill. This section presently allows for a person in whose favor the court has made an order, including an order for costs against the state, to apply to the proper officer of the court any time after the expiration of 21 days from the date of the order for the issue of a certificate containing particulars of the order. The amendment will delete the words 21 days and substitute the words 120 days. 21 days is just too short a time for the court to do what is required to produce the certificate and for the state to do what is required. The clause also provides that the certificate be addressed to the Controller of Accounts and the Solicitor General, and a copy of the order is to be served on the Attorney General by the person in whose favor the order is made. The amendment will also provide that payment of any damages, costs or otherwise, be made as soon as reasonably practical. I will now address certain cleanup measures. Interpretation Act. We are amending the Interpretation Act by Clause 3 of the bill and amending Section 79 of the Interpretation Act, Chapter 301. This is necessary to deal with certain ambiguities as they relate to administrative matters. We propose to add the definition of collecting officer to the existing list. Pursuant to this amendment, the term collecting officer will be defined as a person appointed or designated as or required to perform the functions of a collecting officer with regard to any act required by or for the judiciary pursuant to any rules of court or any law. The person who will be a collecting officer is that person who will treat with attachment of earnings and maintenance orders in relation to family court matters. We also dealing with this definition of collecting officer in the Miscellaneous Provisions Supreme Court of Judicature and Children Act. This definition will be repealed by Clause 32 and placed in Interpretation Act. Summary Courts Act is being amended to treat with the form or manner by which a complaint with it includes any information or charge relating to a summary offense may be made. There is a proposed amendment to the DNA Act, but because of certain concerns about language, we may not proceed with Clause 5 of the bill, and one of the amendments may be to delete that for it to be returned to this Parliament at a later date. Child Rehabilitation Center Act, Clause 9 seeks to amend the Child Rehabilitation Center Act for the purpose of proper referencing. It would provide that in respect of a report being made to the Commissioner that a resident has been subject to a form of prohibited method of punishment, the Commissioner, having investigated, must notify the resident of the center, alleged perpetrator, and person making the allegations of the findings of the investigation. Clause 19 amends the Friendly Societies Act, provides that there shall be in the public service a registrar of friendly societies. With respect to the Criminal Division and District Criminal and Traffic Courts Act, Clause 30 amends this act to revise a list of positions where certain terms are referenced in the written law in relation to proceedings in respect of criminal matters or traffic violations. Electronic Payments into and Out of Court Act 2018, Clause 31 amends the Electronic Payments into and Out of Court Act 2018 at Section 42. The marginal note has been amended to provide for filing and other fees to be paid electronically, whereas Section 14.2 has been amended to extend the use of prepaid cards issued by the court executive administrator to include the payment of filing fees, fees collected by the judiciary under written law, and fees for services provided by the judiciary. This amendment in particular, Madam Speaker, will go a long way to easing up some of the frustrating aspects of interaction with the judiciary in terms of paying fees. Madam Speaker, I am happy and proud to be the Minister of Finance in this PNM government that has been mandated to increase the disability grant, public assistance grant, the limit on pensions, the increase in the threshold in exemption from severance, the increase in exemption from stamp duty on house and land, Madam Speaker, and so many other innovative, generous, and people-friendly measures that were introduced in the 2019 budget. I am so happy as part of a caring PNM government, we can make all of these increases to help the little people of this country. I beg to move, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled an act to provide for the variation of certain duties and taxes and to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature The question is that a bill entitled an act to provide for the variation of certain duties and taxes and to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature and for related matters be now read a second time. Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm very happy for the opportunity to make a short presentation on an act to provide for the variation of certain duties and taxes and to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature and for related matters. I listened to the presentation of the Minister of Finance, and he started out with his conventional narrative, Madam Speaker, of growth and diversification and turnaround in both the energy and non-energy sector. And then he went on at the end to introduce with energy his spin on the entire matter. And in between, he dealt with some of the elements of the bill. And I want to speak to some of those issues now, but not before I disagree with the Minister of Finance and indicate that things are not as rosy as he would like us to believe in this House and in the population. And I don't think the population will believe him at all, because they are living with realities of penance every day. And they feel the deterioration and the decline, and you can sense the loss of enthusiasm in the population wherever you go, whatever they do, everywhere. And the objective realities, as outlined, for instance, in this monetary report, which was recently published by the central bank, indicate that what the Minister of Finance is saying could not possibly be true. Because, you see, Madam Speaker, the net outflow of foreign exchange in this country annually is $1.6 billion. And if you assume that everything is going to continue as it is and remain as it is for the next few years, which is why we must make change, if you assume that everything is going to continue as it is going, by 2025, the reserves, foreign reserves of this country would be absolutely zero. That is a reality that is calculatable by mathematics. In the foreign reserves, I didn't say anywhere else, because I didn't even come to touch what you might do with the HFS. So the debt to GDP at the present time is about 62%. But based on the commitments of the government, the promises, the arrangements they are making with the multilateral institutions, etc., it's not going to be long before we hit 80%. And we are not seeing any rise in the GDP either. And we have a situation where we know that productivity is weak in the country. We know that the ease of business, doing business index has fallen by almost 30 points. The cumulative deficit over the last 3 years is more than the deficit under the People's Partnership for 5 years. It is now $25 billion. And we have university graduates waiting for jobs that they cannot see, and therefore standing in the line thinking about migration, because that is where they can see possible opportunities because of the situation here. So it is true that we have more income from natural gas because of the gas finds and because of the production of juniper and a whole range of things set into motion since 2011 to 14. But that does not, Madam Speaker, speak to anything in Trinidad and Tobago that is positive outside of the energy sector. Because the monetary policy report tells us here the still sluggish overall economic climate has resulted in less favorable labor market conditions, and they talk about the increasing unemployment and the 59% labor participation rate, a drop from the year before last year. And in the domestic economy, the improvement in the energy sector observed in the first quarter of 2018 continued in the second quarter, but they do not see any major boost in other sectors, although they sense that something might be happening in finance and in construction. But as I pointed out in another debate here, Madam Speaker, the cement figures for January to September of 2018 are lower than the cement figures for the same period in 2017. And that is an indicator of what is happening in construction. It could not be rising. There may be things in the pipeline, I don't know. But the reality is that we really have a weak economy in most sectors outside of the energy sector. And the energy sector is, in fact, the gas-based sector in Trinidad and Tobago. So here we have an economy with growing debt. We are not moving out of the recession. No growth outside of the energy sector. A falling GDP, an increase in the number of people not participating in the labor market in the economy, retrenchment, graduates without jobs. So you have the 40, 50-year-old age group affected in a certain way by retrenchment, unemployment. You have the young age group, 18 to 20, affected out of high school because tertiary opportunities are not the same as they used to be. And you have the university graduates coming outside, facing a pretty bleak future. So I wouldn't boast too much about the condition of the economy, And he was right to leave that quickly and go to the substance of the bill in terms of the clauses. And I myself won't dwell on it anymore. I will go to some of the issues here in the bill to speak to some of the clauses and the important things that we might want to consider in the bill. The first thing that I would say, Madam Speaker, is that this bill came to us on Friday. And today, on Wednesday, we are debating the bill. This bill amends 31 pieces of legislation. It amends 31 pieces of legislation. And I suppose it may be assumed that we have nothing to do on Saturday and nothing to do on Sunday. And perhaps Monday and Tuesday might be enough to attend to the bill. But what I did notice was that the outline of the bill, the details of the bill, were not finished by the parliamentary staff until today, which means to say that they had some difficulty with the time frame within which they had to look at this bill and give some details about the meaning of the various clauses and how they impact, because the parliamentary staff is one of the most efficient staffs I have been ever exposed to in the public service. And if they were pressured into providing the details of the bill, today from Friday, then it would create a little pressure to study this bill comprehensively and come here. But we've done our best, and we will speak, as I said, to some of the issues of the bill. But I do want to underscore, having said that, that the way that the government deals with bills, and I've raised this issue before, really reflects a kind of attitude to the opposition that is not a reasonable approach to addressing the issues of Parliament. When you take things like the time squeeze, to me, in consideration of the opposition, sometimes abuse of the majority, and ultimately, with that, the abuse of the parliamentary system. I think when you take all of these together, the government has much to make up for in terms of the manner in which it deals with legislation in the parliament. So there are 31 bills being amended here. 31, yes, no, there are 31 bills being amended here. Acts. And they are bills of great variety and diversity. And the one thing I would say, though, is that I find that there's a kind of, perhaps because the bill only deals with what it is supposed to, and based on legislation or statements that have been made in the budget, it is a bill that is fairly easy to follow, even though it covers such a variety of things in the bill. The pension payments issue, the other issues that the minister mentioned as being favorable things that a minister of finance could do. He mentioned some today. I won't go over them. But the pension payment issue must be seen as a positive intervention in a dysfunctional system, Madam Speaker. And I think it is important to know that, because what it does give the pension to the person at the time that they retire, whichever one we take here in the particular case, and there are several instances of this, you get your $3,500. But what it does speak to is that of a dysfunctional administration. And I'm not blaming the Minister of Finance for this. This is something that is persistent in the system. But it is high time now we deal with this matter. And it is one thing to intervene, as you have done here, Minister, on behalf of the citizen, and I see it as a positive thing. But I want to say this issue of IRIS and the human resource system, which has been going on for years in the public service, simply to harmonize the HR files of all of these people in the public service, and the integrated financial system, which would make it easier to link the IRIS system to the financial system, going on, persisting year after year. And I did ask questions about this during the budget debate. These two things need to be fixed so that we can fix the system. And this is a critical part of the big solution to the problem that is being addressed here. So the amendment, while positive for the human being, while positive for the citizen, is really an attempt to intervene to deal with this reality of a dysfunctional system that doesn't seem to be going away. Now, there are in here a series of revenue-raising measures, I would say. A lot of the increases that I see here are really attempts to raise revenue, I know, partly because of this issue of the budgetary deficit that I mentioned. After 3 years, it's about $25 billion now. But some of the areas in which the penalties have been increased, to me, are areas that are worth attending to, because they deal with children, they deal with indiscriminate practices in relation to hunting, deal with matters, littering, I think, if I'm not mistaken. They deal with issues that need to be attended to. But the key issues here, Madam Speaker, would be the extent to which we have systems, again, that work, and we have enforcement that is reasonable and fair, and that allows for the guilty and those who infringe the law to be prosecuted, and does not allow for arbitrary exercise of power simply because laws exist. And we always have to be concerned about that. You must have laws, and you must have the systems to enforce the law, but you also need to ensure that laws are enforced fairly and that there is no discrimination in the exercise of the law. So I think the revenue measures are measures that we need to take with, in the spirit in which they are given here. Some may say that some of the, in most cases they have been doubled, if I remember correctly from reading it. So basically it's a signal that this is the direction we're going. We want people to obey the law. We don't want them to litter. We don't want to have people indiscriminate in the way that they treat with animals, these kinds of things, the environment. And therefore, I can see the rationale behind it. I see there are also issues related to electronic payments. I may come back to that. But the two issues that really kind of caught me when I was reading this bill were the amendments to the Financial Institutions Act and the amendment to the Insurance Act. And you see, the minister came here this time, and he explained it by saying that the institutions, when they came up when they considered the with the NIF, although they could have done it, they were concerned that if the new bills were proclaimed, that it could affect how they conduct their business and what their situation was according to the law. And there may be some truth to that. But I must say that when this matter came up for the NIF, I raised the issue of the fact that I think at that time I said related party transactions would become an issue because of that National Investment Fund bill. And the minister, when he spoke, he said the right word, and it is in the law, is connected parties transaction, but it is the same principle. And this matter has come up, and the real reason for the amendments to these bills have to do with the fact that they came with the NIF here, and they passed the bill. And as I indicated then, and the minister was not kind to me when he spoke at the end of that debate, Madam Speaker. Yes, and then, when he speaks today, he will not be kind either. You know, I mean, I have his speech here and I have mine, you know, in case he says he didn't say that. But I won't chastise him with that. All I would say is that he was not kind. He called me names, and he insulted me.
That sounds like him. That's the man. No, that's the man.
But of course, he had the last word, and I couldn't say anything in the debate after that. I had already said what I had to say. And he made it feel, you know, he made it seem as if I had come here. No, I won't say it. You know my position. He made it seem as if I did not know what I was talking about, you see. And in the last debate, he in fact said that I didn't know what I was talking about. But Madam Speaker, this is a very important issue. This is a very important issue, you see, because what this amendment does, this amendment really creates the conditions for an investor in the financial sector or in the insurance sector to make unlimited investments if they are in government bonds and if they fit certain criteria. The criteria have been read out by the minister. I need not go into them again. But it really gives the unlimited rein to the financial sector to invest locally. And it says 50% here, but I mean the reality is now they now have unlimited range. But let me tell you why this is important, Madam Speaker. And I speak especially to the citizens out there so that they appreciate and understand that the opposition comes here very, very responsibly to ask the right questions when they come up with things that we don't fully understand. And we question them, we probe them. When we're not sure, we try to get them to tell us the truth.
They lie.
And then...
Yes, thank you.
I'll withdraw that.
Member for Oropouche East, there's a particular kind of penchant. So I will ask you to exercise a little restraint. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When we are not sure of it, we have to ask questions and we have to probe. And sometimes we speculate in the questions and we say, is this so or is this not so? And then after the fact, we find out that we were right, but they would not come here and say, well, yes, these are really the reasons why we are doing it. I want to say this because, you know, I outlined at the beginning that we are in a situation of rising debt and rising debt to GDP, okay? And there's a prime minister of the region, recently elected, a very good prime minister, a politician of some standing and strength for many years in Barbados, now prime minister. And when she came into office and she inherited, I can't remember what was the percentage, but it might have been close to 120% of GDP, 175? She said, when you have a debt, when a country has a debt of over 100%, the banks cannot expect that that country would pay back the money. And she actually said that. Now, she did not rack up the debt, Madam Speaker. She met the debt there. It was done by other administrations. But she said that. And what do you think that would do to the financial sector that is lending to governments? The first thing that it does when you have that kind of framework or understanding or context or appreciation of the context is that the value of government debt to the banking sector is reduced because it's no longer secure. Okay? Immediately you unlatch the pure gold nature of government debt. Because most people would lend to government what they would not lend to the private sector, expecting that government would honor their obligations. And the second thing that it does, of course, is that the private sector institutions, whether they're banks or insurance companies, would begin to rethink how they address this situation in relation to government, because they will have a less of an appetite for giving government debt. And they would want to reduce their own risk by managing how they deal with government in the accumulation of government debt. And when we asked that question, it was a genuine, honest question in a situation in which here was the government doing the NIF, asking a number of institutions to invest, a lot of those institutions being state institutions, okay? And then, in addition, the NIF as a new state enterprise, now having ownership of financial institutions with which it had to do business. So it was in that context that I raised the issue. The issue remains a legitimate issue. The issue remains a valuable issue. And what is happening here now is that the amendment is being made so that insurance companies and financial institutions will now be able to invest up to 50%. And it is the same clause worded appropriately in each instance, so I will just read it once. The inspector, in the case of the financial institutions, and the inspector may grant approval to a license to directly or indirectly incur a credit exposure to a person, borrower, or group, or related group in the form of an investment in a bond in an aggregate amount of up to 50% of its capital base, where such bond is issued by a company incorporated in Trinidad and Tobago, wholly owned and controlled by the state. Okay? That is the NIF. A company wholly owned by the state. Okay? So this amendment is really for that, which they did not want to answer truthfully on the occasion that I asked. Is fully funded and denominated in Trinidad and Tobago dollars. You would remember it was a local bond. We asked the question, why didn't you put it on the stock market? Why didn't you raise the money outside, etc.? Then has an investment grade rating from a credit rating agency approved by the bank. You would remember they got CARICRIS to do the assessment, and they brought the ratings here from CARICRIS as the agency that rated the bond. Is collateralized by highly marketable assets where the value of the collateral is at least 180% of the value of the bond, and those are the shares inside of the banks, the Phoenix Park, etc. Is supported by a sinking fund or other appropriate creditor protection arrangements, satisfy any other conditions which the inspector may require. So basically, this legislation has come after the fact and seeks to make legitimate.
Honourable Member for Caroni Central, your original speaking time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to join them.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It seeks to make legitimate now the investments in the NIF and also creates the conditions in which the NIF can deal with other financial institutions and other banks, other insurance companies, etc. And it does free up some of those insurance companies as well and other financial institutions. I want to raise another issue. And I hope the Minister of Finance answers my question when he speaks at the end, and he doesn't treat it as a speculative question of no account, and that he doesn't treat it as nonsense, because I am asking a legitimate question, because this also opens the door, Madam Speaker, for another investment that I want to address. You see, there has been, for months, certainly over a year and a half now, discussion about sandals. And there has been a lot of discussion about three critical things in sandals. One is, how will sandals be funded? Secondly, what would be the tax incentives given? And thirdly, what would be the environmental cost? Those have been, there are other issues, but those are the three critical ones. And I want to know if by the amendment that we are making here, we are creating the conditions for investments to be made by the private sector in the sandals project through a particular vehicle and agency in which the government might be indirectly involved. You see, we've asked questions in this house here, many of the members on this side. I myself have asked questions on it, but other members have persisted. They have insisted on asking questions on it. And every time we have been told it's going to be a government project. Then we heard that, well, we might invite some private investors. Then we hear it's going to be a management contract. And today we heard from the Prime Minister that if it deserves incentives, we are going to give the incentives because we give in ourselves. So, in view of all of those things, Madam Speaker, I simply want to ask the Minister of Finance to answer straight when he gets up to speak, to reply. To say whether this, I am not asking him if anybody is going to use this to invest. I am not asking him who is going to invest. I am not asking him how much they're going to invest. I am not asking him the nature of the partnership between government and the private sector. I am simply asking him whether a door is opened by this piece of legislation for the private sector to invest with government as an indirect financial player in support of the private investment. That is all I'm asking. And I want a straight answer for that. So, Madam Speaker, this bill has some good measures in it. And I am sure that there are measures in here that we can support. But it also has some things that require explanation and clarity. And the clarity is especially pertinent to the financial sector and the insurance companies and the banks. Because I want to add to that this proviso. I mentioned what the statement by the Prime Minister of Barbados would have meant to the value of government debt and the attitude of the financial sector. Because you see, if you open up the door for related party transactions like this, which really means that government or the institutions of government can borrow pretty uninhibitedly from the banking sector or even from the insurance sector for that matter, because it is possible to do that. If you do that, then what is going to happen is that there's going to be a response to this legislation. Because up to now, it is the government that legislated on this matter of related parties transactions, connected party transactions. But when government opens the door on connected party transactions so wide, financial sector institutions will have not to rely on the legislation to protect themselves, but will have to rely on rules that they make themselves to protect themselves from government legislation. And I wonder, as I asked them when they came with the NIF, if they think through this thing properly. Okay? And you know, in another debate, the minister says she thinks through everything properly, down to the accreditation and everything. So I want to know if they think through this thing properly. You see, because in the debate on the amendment to the Income Tax Act having to do with the Global Forum and so on, the big issue was that they were very, very concerned about what would happen to the banking sector. They were very, very concerned about correspondent banking and all of those issues, which are so critical to the survival of the banking sector and the sustainability of the sector. But in this particular issue, I don't see the least bit of concern for issues such as that. So there's an inconsistency there, Madam Speaker, that bothers me. There's an inconsistency that bothers me. Because, you know, the law can be used to do anything. The law can be used to subvert a constitution. I'm not drawing reference to anything here that does that, because there is no connection at all. But I am saying how the world works. the parliamentary system, the governance system can be used for the purposes of subversion of legitimate things, sometimes held secret. It has been done. I won't even mention the countries surrounding us that are doing this and have done it every day. And therefore, the legitimacy of what is happening here in terms of the bigger picture is something that I'm concerned about, and the consistency of position on this one issue, which is the banking sector, is something that I'm concerned about. And the legislation brought here and rationalized in the way the Minister of Finance rationalized it is something that I'm also concerned about, Madam.
Honorable Member, might I ask how much longer you intend to speak?
Probably less than 5 minutes, yeah.
Probably less or less than?
Less than.
May I ask, would we allow, so that we would allow Member for Caroni Central to complete within the 5 minutes?
Yes. I'll wind up now, Madam Speaker. I mean, this bill has a lot of clauses. As I said, it amends 31 bills. I don't want to go into 10 or 12 of those things, and I do not want to speak on every issue. But I did want to speak on this amendment to the Financial Institutions Act and to the Insurance Act. And because I think it strikes at the core of something bigger. And I wanted to ask the two fundamental questions. Well, one question I know the answer to, and I've stated my position, which is the question of the NIF. I am very clear now about that. So the finance minister doesn't have to say anything about that. I am clear. And whatever he says, I know what the answer is. But on the issue of sandals, I would like to have the one answer to that simple question. Does this open the door to a transaction which allows for private sector participation, but in which the government is indirectly involved in the financial support for that transaction? Madam Speaker, I think I've spoken enough, and I told you I would finish within the allotted time before to allow us to go for tea. And I want to say that there are many issues here that my colleagues, I'm sure, will deal with and raise, because they cover so many issues, from children, as I said, to nature and the environment. And there are very, very important issues to be covered. But I've said my little bit. I hope my contribution makes sense, Madam Speaker, and I thank you for the opportunity for giving me the time to make the contribution. Thank you.
I thank you, Member for Caroni Central. Members, it is now 4:32. We shall take the suspension now, and we shall resume at 5:10.